So Republicans are back at it again, this time floating the idea of cutting Medicare and Social Security. Here we go. Now, this is Representative Steve Stivers of Ohio. And on Monday, apparently he defended the GOP tax cuts, the $1.9 trillion tax cuts for the rich, and argued that we should overhaul Medicare and Social Security in order to reduce the deficit. Of course, this is something that we said was going to happen. They're going to pass gigantic tax cuts for the rich. They're going to pass them for corporations. And then they're going to say, what can we do? We're now broke. We're going to have to cut Medicare. We're going to have to, cut Social Security. Great. Now, Stivers told CNBC that the 2017 tax cuts will benefit the U.S. economy and lead to lower deficits than those currently projected. But wait a minute. If it's supposed to lead to lower deficits and grow the economy, then why are you talking about cutting Medicare and Social Security? We will get to that. Now, here's the thing. The projection, right? And this is projected levels, right? That projection contrasts with an estimate from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, which now has downgraded recently its growth estimate for the economy. Hey, it turns out those tax cuts weren't actually effective at growing the economy. But you know what it actually did grow? The stock buybacks, the amount of stock buybacks, the amount of executive compensation, the amount of executive profit. Those are the only things that grew. Did it grow wages? No, wages are stagnant. Inflation is 2.8%. Wage growth, 2.7%. Yeah, unemployment may be down, but guess what? That doesn't mean anything if you're working at a job that makes it so that you can't actually afford to live. So, anyway, now, not only that, but the White House's Office of Management and Budget said in July that federal deficits will surpass $1 trillion next year, and with budget watchdogs saying the 2017 tax cuts are playing a big role in that increase. Not only that, but you also have increased military spending and subsidies going to farmers, for example, or I should say to cover for Donald Trump's tariffs. So, look, here's the thing, right? Haven't we already done this before? Didn't we learn our lesson from the George W. Bush tax cuts? Didn't we learn our lesson from the Ronald Reagan tax cuts? I'm talking the American people, the elites, the people in charge. They already knew this. The whole point was to take money from the lower and middle and funnel it off to the rich. That was kind of the whole point. So, and of course, regular people, it seems like we haven't caught on, and I'm not sure why. Why a lot of Republicans still vote against their economic self-interest. And not only their own self-interest, but the interest of the country as a whole. Because again, without that money, without that revenue, we can't afford things. We can't afford things like fixing bridges, roads. We can't afford infrastructure. We can't afford to fix Flint's water. We can't afford to fix anything if we continue to have these gigantic tax cuts. That's the problem here. Now, look, the Bush tax cuts, for example, turned a projected surplus into a massive deficit along with 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we've been running deficits ever since, despite Obama lowering that deficit to around $400 billion. So here's the thing about that. Now, President Obama got a lot of heat because he continued tax cuts. He continued a lot of Bush's tax cuts. I gave him a lot of shit for that. And unfortunately, a lot of corporate media did not. They did not talk about that. That, of course, made it so that we still had some of those large deficits, in which Republicans, of course, would say, well, we got to do something to slow the spending. I know, we got to cut Medicare and Social Security. Not like President Obama nearly cut Social Security. That's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. We talked about the grand bargain. This supposed grand bargain would have changed Social Security into a chain CPI. That would have been an effective cut in Social Security benefits. Do you know why Obama stopped talking about that? Bernie Sanders, progressives, we said, hey, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't cut Social Security. Maybe instead of doing that, we should stop, the wars in the Middle East. Maybe we should stop giving more tax cuts to the rich. Maybe we should actually, instead of cutting Social Security, expand Social Security. But that's not the direction that the current Republican administration wants to go into. And I'm not saying that the Democrats, of course, are completely innocent in this. There's a lot of Democrats that also support tax cuts. It's just for their specific businesses that they support and deregulation. But we'll get to that in another segment. Now, here's Stivers saying, quote, I do think we need to deal with some of our spending. We've got to try to figure out how to spend less. Well, I just told you how we can spend less. Maybe we could cut the Pentagon budget in half, end these wars, or maybe stop doing corporate welfare and maybe roll back some of those tax cuts for the rich. Oh, who am I kidding? Look at who I'm talking about. He went to say on to say that he agrees with the assessment by Speaker Paul Ryan that the biggest spending issues pertain to Medicare and Social Security. By the way, I have to remind you, Social Security doesn't add a dime to the deficit. It's paid for. So it's already funded for the next 30 years. And if we were to lift the payroll tax, or if we were to lift the tax cap on that, then it would be funded into perpetuity. It doesn't add a dime to the deficit. Now, he continues, we have to bend the cost curve on healthcare, adding that he was open to a variety of solutions, but approved a Ryan proposal to alter Medicare so that the recipients receive vouchers to spend on whatever health insurance plan they choose. Because that's what everybody wants to do. Oh, no, everybody, people that are on Medicare, we want them to have vouchers, right? That's what the Republicans are saying. People on Medicare don't want to sit there and shop around for health insurance. They got better things to do. And that voucher, by the way, is not going to cover as much as Medicare does today. And Medicare right now already does not have enough funding, right? Does not cover the types of things that it should cover. That's why Bernie Sanders has an expanded Medicare for All plan, which actually covers some of the things that Medicare does not right now. Medicaid is actually the more superior health plan, but unfortunately it's not accessible. So really, if you want to get down to sort of the gritty specifics, it's more of maybe we should have a Medicaid for all. And that's sort of what Bernie Sanders' plan calls for, but just calling it Medicare for all instead. But anyway, now, here's the other thing, right? So why do we have to cut Medicare when it's actually far more efficient and cost effective than private insurance? But by the way, the government does subsidize private insurance. Why do we have to cut that? When it's actually cheaper, maybe we should actually go to a Medicare for all system that saves people money. Doesn't save the government money, saves people money. Saves everybody money. But of course, look, the thing is, the answer to that question, should we cut Medicare and Social Security, is no. That's actually not the problem. The problem is the tax cuts. They've given 83% of the benefit to the wealthiest Americans. Those are the people that need the money the least, right? And what this does, these tax cuts, is it basically robs money that could have been used for roads, bridges, healthcare, and basically the general welfare of the people in the country. If you want to save money, you don't go after those programs. No, you end the wars, You cut the Pentagon budget, you tax the rich and corporations fairly, you institute Medicare for all, which is said before in studies, has been shown to save people money. And now, are they going to go in that direction? No, of course not. Now, I want to give you the justification here that Stivers comes up with in order to cut Medicare and Social Security. Quote, "The way I'd like to see us do it is end the benefit cliffs and create ramps where the more people earn, it might cost them a little more for their social subsidy, but they can actually keep their Medicaid expansion, or they can keep their housing, but they can actually have an incentive to take that pay raise and do better and pay more taxes." Now, here's the thing. Now, when you're talking about people on Medicare and Social Security, people on Medicare and Social Security are more likely to be either retired or disabled. So, meaning that these people either work their entire lives and are now too old to work, or they're disabled, or both. Again, you've got to be 65 to get Social Security, right? Retirement, or you have to be disabled, and you have to go through an entirely enormous process in order to prove that you're disabled, in order to get disability, Social Security, right? So Steve Stivers is saying that those people are being held back by those programs, and they should be working and should have an incentive to do better. But wait a minute. Again, Medicare and Social Security are basically lifelines to people who no longer work or no longer can work. And look, there are people on Social Security who do work who are only able to work part-time too. Basically, these programs have ensured that millions of seniors and disabled people could have at least some measure of dignity. And right now, Social Security doesn't give a lot of money. It doesn't pay a lot for people to survive. There are people surviving on $700-800 right now a month. And that's it. That's hardly anything. So how gross are people like Steve Stivers, right? Look, here's what we should do. We should make anyone who wants to cut social programs live on those social programs for a protracted period of time without any other help. Then we'll see if they can survive. Odds are there's a lot of people that would not make it. But lucky for them, that'll never happen, because guess what? They're millionaires bankrolled by giant donors and corporations. They basically earned every penny by selling out to those corporations, whose only goal is, of course, to maximize profit. And that includes by cutting taxes on themselves, by deregulating so that they can go and pollute in that river because it saves them a couple bucks. So, and if that means effectively killing old people and the disabled by cutting their lifeline, well, so be it, man. We need to make that extra buck. This is what this is. This is an issue of life and death. You think an 80-year-old is going to have an easy time finding a job and having the incentive to take that promotion to get out of poverty? No, man. That's the reality of the situation of millions of Americans. I think instead of cutting Social Security and Medicare to feed tax cuts for the rich, we need to do the opposite. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.